The weight loss was great. I'm happier. I feel better, but I don't think I would have really stuck with it just for weight loss. We convince ourselves like, oh, I could have a little bit of this or I could have some of that and still keep the weight off. I'm petrified of losing the energy that I have. And that's why I've kind of been able to stay the path. I do not want to go back to needing a nap every day or not being able to focus and concentrate. And I really feel like taking the gluten, some of those other things out of my diet is what did that for me and made those huge changes. People in my life looked at me and would just, not even the weight loss, they said my eyes looked clearer and my face looked just brighter. And so many people said, how do I get what you have? How do I get this thing that you just did? And I was like, oh, I can give you my FDN's name. And finally I said, wait, like my kids were like later in high school, moving on to college. I have some time. Maybe I could do this for other people. Maybe I can be the one that helps you. And I had been listening to the podcast and I was like, maybe I'll look into taking the FDN course myself. It just changed my life so much. I couldn't wait to help other people.
You threw that on. That was a surprise, right? Because did that happen on a summer open house event? Am I? No, it was the business course.
I had been listening to them like all summer long.
Yeah.
I signed up later in the summer, but I had listened all summer long to all of those events and just kept throwing around in my mind like, oh, mate, I wonder if I should do this.
Yes, it was an August business workshop
Yes.
with Jennifer Woodward. And the reason I remember that so vividly is because if people are signing up live, we'll always shout out their names. And then I look at the name, I'm like, and I double take really quick. And I'm like, because I'm like, all right, Jennifer Hill Jones. I'm like, that's pretty coincidental. And then, of course, we all started texting afterwards. We're like, all right, this is amazing. So I'm glad that you stuck to what you said that you were going to do as well. And guys, this is why I said I couldn't have scripted this better, because these are the things that you need to do when you're on the phone with someone. You don't have to do this exact thing, but you want to make sure they're going to commit to this if they get the lab results back, because you don't want someone to spend money on the consultations and labs and not do this stuff. And you did exactly what you said you were going to do. You were very realistic and said, if it doesn't show up, I don't know how that's really going to work. That might not be my thing. But if I see it show up, then I will be committed. And not only did you commit, you committed through what, like you said, was a sucky 2 to 3 weeks. And I look at that, I'm thinking, wow, if you were addressing the sugar, the gluten side, depending on the specific genes that you have, you would know this, but some of the audience members might not. For certain people, gluten can really like trigger the opiate receptors in the brain. It can almost be an addiction, right? And sugar certainly is an addiction for all of us. I don't know if it's better or worse to try to remove a lot of the main stuff at once, maybe just get it over with, but that can really be quite literally a crappy 2-3 weeks if you are dealing with this almost withdrawal while still trying to maintain a normal life. And then on top of it, you have to be using your brain, because now you have to think, how do I get this different food in or that food in? And I'm like you, I'm someone that I need to see it on the paperwork. I'm actually probably way worse than you. I think I have almost zero discipline unless I see it on the paperwork, and then I lock in completely. I haven't, you're going to cringe at this. I just got these results back today. So I ran a GI map and a bunch of other stuff because of the mold exposure, and I was just seeing what was going on. So yes, mold came back. So that will be one of the reasons that I felt a little off. But one of the things ever since I met Maddie, even though she's gluten-free, is we go out to eat more. I also just got older and could afford to go out to eat, thank God. And the anti-gliadin on the GI map is like through the roof. So I'm Detective Ev, and I'm still getting exposed. So it's not to make people paranoid. It just shows the risk factors. Because I'm thinking now, I'm like, I don't even know if it's the mold exposure that's making me feel worse. Because gluten like killed me and my mom. Anyway, my point is the fact that something like that can make us feel so bad. We have that disconnected in our brains until we see it on the paper. And now I'm going overhaul. And the first thing I told Maddie today, I'm like, we cannot go out unless it's a place that is whole facilities gluten-free. Like, I'm not messing with any of these places again.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely hard. And it's a very mental thing to give up some of it's as mentally challenging as it is anything else. Of course, as soon as I say, oh, I'm not going to eat this, what's the first thing you want? Whatever you're not having. Like, you didn't care about going out for weeks. Now that you say you're not going out, it's, oh, but I really want to go to that place.
All right, let's talk about how this has developed for you then. I missed one question that's really important. So you went through the FDN course. So I want to talk about obviously the business side and what you're doing with that. But in the FDN course, that was a perfect follow-up for you, because at the now we include every single lab test, guys, including the food sensitivity test. When you went through, we included every single test except the food sensitivity test. So it couldn't have been more perfect. You get to go do all the other labs. What were some of the things that came up on those labs at that point? And I only say this because FDN is, we're so sensitive with what we test for that there's usually room for improvement. So I'm wondering, even though you felt a lot better by then, were there still things to work on when you ran the labs while going through the course?
There was. It was definitely probably much better than it would have been earlier. The biggest thing that stuck out to me was like the zonulin and the histamine. I was sure I had done so much work on my diet. I was taking the leaky gut supplement. I was sure I had fixed my leaky gut. And it's still like you could see on that test, the zonulin was still high. I think the histamine was high and DAO. They were all off. They were all indicating leaky gut. And I was disappointed. I was like, oh, I really thought had fixed it. And it just goes to show like a lot of times it's not fixed. It's a cycle and it gets better and it gets worse. And you have to continually look at it and reassess. You don't make the change once and it's all done. I'm still going through, I'm still retesting things and making changes now. But that MBA was really the thing that stuck out to me the most, was like, oh, I was sure this was going to be perfect because of all the work I did, but it wasn't. I fixed it. I had a little bit, I didn't have a lot on the GI map. My cortisol was okay, a little low in the midday. Overall, those labs looked okay.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we'd expect, right? With
Mhm.
someone who, again, was not necessarily severely ill prior to doing this stuff, had phenomenal results already with the MRT and the dietary changes, and then you had committed to that for a good period of time, really, before doing those tests. So that makes sense, and I'm still glad that there was something noteworthy with the MBA, right? Because the flip side of it is always, I would have. Who the heck's testing for this stuff? You would have never known this probably until much farther down the road. So that's what's so cool about the FDN foundational tests and a lot of the other tests that we offer as well. But the foundationals in particular, it's like I could run these with someone who is on paper the healthiest person ever, and we can still find things for improvement. So you're benefiting their future. Or you can find someone who, again, has multiple different diagnosed conditions like myself, and you can help that person too. So I just think it's so cool to have a set of labs that can help the healthiest person, quote unquote, and yet the sickest, kind of in similar ways. And again, it's always humbling. Like you said, it's a cycle. I looked at the GI map. It's definitely better than the one that I ran years ago, but I'm like, man, I still got to keep myself in check. I think I'm doing all this stuff right. And that gluten one is one I would never, ever purposely go against because I know what it does to me and I know what it does to my mom. So I just thank God I feel as good as I do,
Yeah.
considering it's that high. Okay, good news is you went through the FDN course and the labs themselves weren't anything terrible. MBA, some stuff to work on. That's good. Another thing I wanted to ask about FDN itself, if that's all right,
Mhm.
is what what were you expecting versus what did you get? And what I mean by that is I think people know that FDN is going to be somewhat rigorous. I don't necessarily think they fully get what they're getting in an online course until they go through it. If your experience is different, please always be honest with that. But I'd love to know what your expectations were going in. Obviously, you had positive ones because you wouldn't have done it otherwise. But I'm hoping that we exceeded that when you went through. And if that's not the case, you can let us know that too.
Yeah, I was really expecting, I don't even know that I was going into it to build a business. I was going into it because I thought it was interesting and let's learn it. When we had talked initially, I had considered running all the labs and we really decided, like, look at the diet first. Like, my diet was poor enough. That would be a great first focus. And I'm glad that was what we focused on. Part of me was like, if I do all these other tests, maybe I'll have H. pylori and I can still eat the sugar and the gluten. I wanted to do all the tests so that I didn't have to give up the foods. So I'm very happy I did it the way we did it. So I just went into FDN. Oh, I wanted to learn some things. I never thought I would get the types of knowledge and the depth of knowledge that I did. I don't have a very scientific background. My husband knows a lot about medicine and has been in that community. And he would look at what I was doing. He's like, you don't know any of these things. I said, I'm learning all about this now, and different kinds of bacteria and blood work, like all of it. So I got a lot more knowledge than I expected. I thought, oh, they'll show me the SHP lab test and I'll learn a couple things about it. But the level of detail that you get is I can't even explain like how detailed it is. So I was blown away by the amount of information there was. It certainly takes some getting used to and figuring out how to learn it and how to put it in its place. The practicals that you do at the end of the course, where you bring it all together and do a mock interview with a client or do a mock case review. I loved doing those. They were hard, but the preparation for it really helped tie the whole course together. And when I've talked to new trainees, I did some talks with some, like just a Facebook group that was created for some trainees that I knew one of the people. So I talked to them and I told them, like, get through the course, learn it. But when you get to the practicals is when it'll all come back together. You don't have to memorize every single value of every single marker on every single test as you go through each module.
Yeah.
When you get to the end in the practicals, that's when it all comes back together.